Um, so I guess like when we talk about virtual reality, augmented reality, and so on, I guess it's important just to agree on terminology and just to explore that for a second. So there's really kind of 4 levels of XR. So virtual reality is when you take the real world and you just completely obliterate it. You put on a headset, you're not aware of the world around you, and you have a full transposition into a new environment. That's the most common thing we're probably aware of at this point in time, the full head-mounted displays where you don't see the world around you. Augmented reality is kind of, in the strictest sense of the word, augmented reality is simply layering information from a digital source on top of the real world. So if you remember, Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1980s walking around this Terminator looking for Sarah Connor, all the information he had flying up in front of him was technically augmented reality. Even the likes of Pokemon Go, that's just overlaying a digital image on top of the real world. It's not really interacting with the real world. When you get to mixed reality, that's when you're talking about actually interacting with the real world, and that's the real trick. So with mixed reality, the device that you're actually interacting with builds a model of the physical world around you. And by doing that, it can now get the digital assets to interact with the physical world using, let's say, collision detection, or even simple stuff like when you walk behind a wall, you want an object that's in the other room not to appear in front of you. That requires a huge amount of compute and so on from the device itself. And then finally, merged reality it's a little step beyond mixed reality. So the idea of merged reality is that when you're in an augmented and a mixed reality space, the system takes a physical item, so it might be a physical rectangle like this, and it merges a digital asset on top of it. So this podium now becomes a piece of equipment. So it's physically there from a tactile perspective, but from a visual perspective, the visual image of it is replaced with an image that might come from SolidWorks or something like that. So you get kind of the best of all worlds. So that's kind of your progression through the various types of reality. The common threads in all of them: head tracking, so the system knows where you're looking. There's a real sense of depth perception, and it's all done in real time. So it's all really real-time collaborative. So before I delve a little bit more into the technology, I just want to, signpost some of the areas in life science, and I'll delve into these more just later on. But the 5 main areas that we're looking at in deploying mixed and augmented reality into the life science area is digital work instructions, so getting people the right information at the right point in time as to what they need to do for their task. Virtual HMIs, which is augmenting the information available to you as you walk the factory floor. Remote assistance is very quickly and easily getting someone to help you in your situation without them having to travel a long distance or incur huge costs. Training is allowing a user using physical equipment to have information augmented to them to help them in their training experience and to audit their progression through a training plan. And then finally, equipment design reviews is the notion that lots of people collaboratively, and I think, Andrew, you were talking about this, that from an equipment design review perspective, having lots of people collaborate around digital assets but in a physical, tactile, collaborative way is a very, very powerful future use of this technology. So I've got 2 quick videos. So this one just shows you what Hololens is doing. So this is particularly from Hololens. So this is a notion of the object building a 3D model of the room. So this is our lobby in ActionPoint up in Limerick. As you can see, by me just literally looking around, what Hololens is doing under the hood is actually building a 3D model. It's slowly but surely figuring out that there is a cabinet. It's got a horizontal surface, a vertical surface. You can see there's a little gap there between the flower pot that I thought was one thing, and then slowly but surely you realize, hold on, they're 2 different things. So by Hololens building up that 3D model of the room, that now means that if you drop a ball on a table, it'll actually land on the table, it'll roll off the table, physically hit the floor, roll on the floor, and run into the flower pot and come to a halt. So from making sure that when you're dealing with a digital asset in a physical world, the system knowing what the physical world actually is allows you to make sure that you don't have things hidden behind walls and that sort of stuff. So it's a very powerful thing to have. Then from an interaction perspective, these things sit in your head. They're fully self-contained computers, so you don't have keyboards. So how do you interact with it? So the seminal sci-fi Minority Report with Tom Cruise throwing his assets around as he was exploring the criminal case was like, it was mind-blowing at the time. And we're actually a bit more advanced than that now because we don't need to wear gloves. It's literally, you interact with HoloLens by moving your hand around in front of your face, tapping and gesturing. So the example of this is, you can see here, I'm just going to take this little cityscape model, move it around, adjust it, scale it up, scale it down. And it's a very interactive, intuitive way of doing it. It takes maybe literally a minute or so to get used to it. And once you're used to it, it's actually very, very intuitive. Now, you'll see here, as I move it through the wall, it actually collides with the wall and rotates through the wall. So that's a physical model seamlessly helping you to avoid something looking a bit silly. Also, I couldn't move it through the floor. Again, the physical model, the system's aware of that physical model. It's a very powerful combination. So going to the use cases. So, I guess in ActionPoint, we really try and focus on the business value. What's the business case? We do not like using technology for technology's sake. I like technology, but only in the context of a business value. So I'm going to talk through a little bit more the 5 use cases we've identified. So digital work instructions, you can see from the previous 2 videos how it's very easy for the system to pull in digital information and present it. So the idea of digital work instructions is that rather than having a tablet or something that costs your operator, one hand, let's say, or a paper, which just isn't allowed in a clean room environment generally, you can have a digital interaction with your MES system, getting the most recent instruction that operator requires and have it presented to them as they're actually going through their action. Also, you can seamlessly audit what's going on because the Hololens can record the point of view as the operator is doing their task. So it kind of gives you both sides of the human operator control circle. So virtual HMIs, this is the notion that as you walk the factory floor, we've all seen the traffic lights and the LCD screens. So the idea is that you can actually virtualize those. So they don't actually physically exist. They only exist in the viewpoint of the person wearing equipment like the HoloLens. But HoloLens then is aware of context. It's aware of where you are and who you are. So if you're the finance guy walking the factory floor, you can now actually see metrics in dollars on factory throughput. If you're the ops guy, you start seeing maintenance records off the various pieces of equipment as you walk around. If you're the maintenance guy, yeah, and if you're the ops guy, it's throughput, cycle time, and so on. Also, if you see a red light on a light stack, you can actually tap it to pull up more information. So an awful lot of IoT is about the data, as Joe was saying, but a lot of the challenges is the data sits off up in the cloud and it's not accessible in a physical location. So having that available via an augmented reality means that data captured from the real world is now visible and interactable back in the context of the real world, which is a very powerful way of looking at the data. Remote activity, so a lot of people here would be very familiar with the difficulty of gowning up and down, going in and out of clean rooms. So if you've got a problem in a clean room and the expert's not in the clean room, it might take a couple of minutes to get that expert into the clean room. Best case scenario, it could be a lot longer, worst case scenario, or they might not even be in the country. So this example, of course, is a guy in space, which is a bit extreme, but the notion is that you can get someone to log into your headset and essentially have telepresence to the point of view that they're looking through a camera that's literally mounted here. So you don't have to hold a phone to try and give them a point of view. They have your point of view. Furthermore, what they can do is they can annotate your world. So they can drop arrows and circles and annotation in 3D space that stays fixed in 3D space. So as you move around, that arrow that they dropped on the button that you need to press stays put. So it's a very powerful interactive approach to helping someone who may not have the skills with someone who does have the skills but is remote. The training side of things, so the idea here is that you essentially, you can create a physical world and you can create tooltips that are available in the physical world. So you can help users who don't know how to use a complex piece of equipment to learn how to use it by annotating that piece of equipment. You could have a training record. You could have an expert whose activities are recorded. Their hands are now physically moving in 3D space. So an operator puts on a headset looking at the same piece of equipment. They can see the expert ghost using the piece of equipment and learn how to use it. Their ghost can also be recorded then and compared against the expert ghost, so you can calibrate and see how they're progressing towards their training and are there deviations in how they're operating stuff and so on. And you can also audit and make sure that they have indeed checked that this thing is running at 27 degrees or whatever it is that you need to be checking. And the final one, this is highly collaborative. Equipment design reviews, it was raised already this morning. So, there's tens of stakeholders involved, and when these things go wrong, they go very, very wrong. And it's exceptionally difficult to conceptualize 3D objects on a 2D screen. It's even more difficult to conceptualize how those 3D objects are going to interact with each other when they're not side by side on the 2D screen. So the idea of equipment design review in an augmented reality and merged reality space is that you can put physical items in a room to represent the physical parts of the line, and then overlay onto those, let's say, your SolidWorks objects. So now all of a sudden you can see, is the access panel down here physically going to be blocked by the box next door? As you're walking around the system, rather than it being VR where you don't get any tactile feedback, you'll notice when you walk into and bump into something physical. So using the whole gamut of the full merged reality, you get both a tactile awareness of what can physically move where within the space, and you also get the visual understanding of what is accessible from where. So you get haptics as well as actual visual representation. It ain't going to be easy though. So I'm not here saying, hey, this is all going to be cool, guys, let's start this next week. So there's major adoption barriers in the life science space. Essentially, it's a regulated environment, so it's very risk averse and understandably so. So what we're working with BioMarin is we've got this 3-step process that we're going through. So the first thing is just build confidence around the device itself, operationally, how is it charged, managed, maintained, cleaned, who gets to use it, and so on. Then use the out-of-the-box remote assistance to try and build that understanding of exactly what kind of comes out of the box. Next thing would be identify a couple of areas where we can operate in parallel with a regulated activity, but we are not a regulated activity. So you're just proving that it does indeed add value to a given regulated activity. And once the organization has brought along those various steps, well, then you might look at actually deploying a regulated activity on the device, but that's still quite a bit out. So to finish off, like this is an exploratory space. It's inherently an R&D activity. So we have an idea factory, which is a process that we bring people through to ideate where AR and mixed reality and so on might be of benefit to the business. It's kind of a case of, look, here's the technology, that's cool, but let's now focus on the business value side of things. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions on the panel. Thanks.